Captain Jack Sterling stood at the front of the group, his eyes locked on the planet below. A scar ran down the left side of his face, a testament to the many battles fought in the cold depths of space. Behind him, his squad of hardened men, specialists in hand-to-hand combat, marksmanship, and survival, waited silently. They were here for one purpose: to make contact with the Zifrins, a species rumored to have transcended the need for violence. As the Valiant descended, the landscape of Zypheros unfolded in vast green plains and towering crystalline structures that seemed to touch the clouds. The planet was pristine, unscarred by war or industrialization, a perfect reflection of its pacifist inhabitants. Captain Sterling had read the briefings. The Zifrins were telepathic, known for their advanced technology and disdain for anything they deemed primitive, including humanity's warlike history. The squad disembarked from the ship, boots touching alien soil. Ahead, a delegation of Zifrins awaited them. They were tall and graceful, their blue skin shimmering in the soft light of their twin suns. Their large, silver eyes blinked without emotion as they gazed at the humans. One, dressed in flowing robes that seemed to ripple with energy, stepped forward. This was Kellner, one of their leaders, and his presence dominated the gathering. "Welcome to Zypheros," Kellner said, resonating directly in the minds of the humans. The squad tensed, and used to such direct mental communication. "We have heard much of your kind, though we find your ways puzzling." There was an almost imperceptible sneer in his tone. "Perhaps you will indulge us with a demonstration of your weaponry? We are curious about how your species has chosen to defend itself." Captain Sterling stepped forward. "We appreciate your hospitality. My men and I are ready to show you what we brought. A quiet warning not to mistake humanity's courtesy for weakness." As they were led to a wide, open arena, the Zifrins' curiosity morphed into amusement. The arena was a grand structure made of transparent, glowing material, its purpose clearly for exhibition rather than battle. Kellner gestured to it with a lazy wave, as if the event to follow was no more than a trivial diversion. The humans approached the center of the arena, drawing their weapons from the cases they had brought. But instead of the plasma rifles or energy shields the Zifrins expected, Sterling and his men produced stones, clubs, and spears, rudimentary tools of survival from Earth's ancient past. There was a collective pause, then a wave of silent laughter rippled through the alien audience. The sound didn't reach the humans' ears, but they felt the ridicule echo in their minds. Kellner, lips curling in amusement, stepped forward again. "These are your weapons." His telepathic voice was drenched in disbelief. "Surely you jest." Sterling glanced at his men, his expression unreadable. "We've found that sometimes the simplest tools are the most effective." His voice carried a weight that hung in the air, and the Zifrins' laughter faltered, just for a moment. Still, Kellner pressed on, eager to further his mockery. "You've come a long way for such a primitive demonstration, Captain Sterling. Here on Zypheros, we have moved beyond such crude methods. We rely on the mind, the most powerful weapon of all. You would do well to remember that." Behind Sterling, Lieutenant Briggs, a mountain of a man with a face like stone, tightened his grip on his club. The squad had been briefed on the Zifrins' telepathic abilities, but seeing them in action was another thing entirely. Sterling had known this mission would be a test, but now he felt the disdain of their hosts crawling under his skin. He turned to face Kellner directly, meeting the alien's gaze with a cold, determined stare. "I've learned never to underestimate an opponent," Sterling said, his voice low and steady, "and I suggest you do the same." For a brief moment, Kellner's smile faltered. He turned away with a wave of his hand. "Begin your demonstration. Show us how your kind handles conflict." The humans moved into position, each man selecting his chosen weapon. To the aliens, it must have looked absurd. A group of warriors wielding clubs and stones against a race that could subdue opponents with a mere thought. The Zifrins watched, amused but disinterested, their telepathic commentary buzzing silently among them. Captain Sterling stood still, feeling the weight of the eyes upon him. The stage was set, But this would be no mere demonstration. He could sense the undercurrent of disdain from their alien hosts, and deep down, a truth became clear. This wasn't just a display of weaponry. It was a test of humanity's worth in a galaxy that had long dismissed them as nothing more than relics of a violent past. He raised his hand, signaling his men to prepare. Let's show them what we're made of. As the demonstration began, Captain Sterling's men readied themselves, gripping their primitive weapons with the calm certainty of warriors who had survived countless battles. The Ziphrans, standing in a loose circle around the arena, watched with amusement flickering in their silver eyes. The aliens found the human display not only laughable but insulting, their telepathic conversations buzzing just beneath the surface of the human's awareness. Kellner stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his alien expression unreadable, though the curl at the corner of his lips spoke of arrogance. "A fascinating choice, Captain Sterling," he remarked, his voice pressing into Sterling's mind. "But physical strength is nothing without the will to wield it. We will show you that true power does not reside in crude weapons, but in the mind." Without further warning, the Ziphrans launched their mental attack. The assault hit like an invisible wave, a crushing force that sought to burrow into the minds of the human squad. Each man felt it, a suffocating pressure that twisted their thoughts, clawed at their consciousness, and tried to paralyze them in place. It was as if a weight had dropped onto their shoulders, an unrelenting force compelling them to surrender without raising a hand. Sterling staggered but quickly grounded himself, his mind sharpening in response to the assault. His muscles tensed, and he shot a glance at his men. They were fighting too, jaws clenched, knuckles white as they gripped their weapons, their bodies trembling under the psychic weight pressing down on them. Lieutenant Briggs, the strongest among them, growled in frustration, his eyes narrowing with defiance. Inside his mind, Sterling could feel the Ziphran presence probing deeper, attempting to find a weakness, a chink in his mental armor. The whispers grew louder, taunting, mocking, demanding submission. But beneath the alien's attempt to control him, Sterling felt something older stir within his mind. The primal instinct of survival that had carried humanity through the darkest chapters of their history. His ancestors hadn't needed technology to survive. They had needed will. The more the Ziphrans pressed, the more resistance they met. Sterling gritted his teeth, focusing all his energy on pushing back against the psychic tide. The primitive tools in his men's hands became symbols of something more, an unbreakable spirit. His mind cleared, and with a roar of defiance, Sterling broke free of the alien grip. A single stone flew through the air, aimed with the precision of a seasoned soldier. It struck one of the Ziphrans standing at the edge of the arena, catching the alien square in the chest. The Ziphran staggered, his psychic hold faltering as he gasped in shock. He had not expected a physical attack, not from these primitive weapons. One by one, Sterling's men found their footing. The alien grip on their minds weakened, not because of any failure in the Ziphrans' power, but because of the sheer human instinct to resist. Lieutenant Briggs let out a guttural snarl and hurled his spear toward another alien, who recoiled, eyes widening in fear. The spear missed its mark, but the message was clear. The humans would not be so easily controlled. "What is this?" Kellner's voice cracked across Sterling's mind, tinged with disbelief. "You should have submitted. You cannot resist our power." But Sterling knew better. He had seen what happened when a species grew too dependent on their abilities, when they believed themselves untouchable. The Ziphrans had forgotten what it meant to fight, to struggle, to claw their way through a hostile world with nothing but instinct and will. That was where the humans thrived, where they had always thrived. "You underestimate us," Sterling growled. He bent to pick up another stone, his hand steady. "You think because you can control minds, that makes you invincible. But there's one thing you don't understand about humans." With a swift, practiced movement, he hurled the stone toward Kellner. The alien leader barely had time to blink before the projectile smashed into the ground at his feet, cracking the crystalline floor of the arena. Kellner flinched, the first real sign of fear crossing his face. "We don't break," Sterling continued. Not as easily as you think. The other humans followed his lead, launching their stones and clubs with terrifying accuracy, each strike shattering the Zifrin's illusions of superiority. The aliens faltered, their telepathic unity fractured by the sudden and unexpected resistance. Their psychic grip on the squad unraveled, and the humans pushed forward, gaining ground with every deflected mental assault. Kellner, stunned by the scene unfolding before him, found his voice slipping from its usual calm cadence. "This is impossible," he hissed into the minds of his peers. "No species has ever resisted our influence, but it was too late. The humans, with nothing but stones and raw determination, had turned the tide of the demonstration. The Zifrins had sought to dominate them with their minds, but they had overlooked one crucial truth. Human survival wasn't about advanced technology or psychic powers. It was about resilience. Captain Sterling, breathing heavily but standing tall, stared across the battlefield at Kellner. The alien leader was shaken, his confidence shattered. The humans had proven their point. Sterling signaled to his men, who stood ready, their weapons in hand, waiting for the next move. But Sterling already knew. The Zifrins had lost this fight long, before it had even begun. The arena was silent now, save for the sharp breathing of Captain Sterling and his men. The Zifrins, so confident moments before, stood frozen in disbelief, their minds rattled by what had just transpired. Stones and clubs, the most rudimentary of weapons, had disrupted the telepathic grip they believed unshakable. The humans stood victorious, not through advanced technology or cunning strategy, but through raw determination and unyielding spirit. Kellner took a step back, his glowing eyes flicking between the humans, who now seemed more dangerous than any enemy he had ever faced. He had seen the humans' muscles strain under the pressure of the telepathic attack, watched them resist what no other species had before. His arrogance was gone, replaced by something unfamiliar, fear. "How?" Kellner's voice was sharp, telepathic edges now frayed with confusion. "How did you resist us?" "You are primitive." Captain Sterling's lips pressed into a thin line, and he slowly lowered his arm, the last stone still in his hand. He studied Kellner with a quiet intensity, sensing the alien's disbelief. But there was no need for further words of superiority. Sterling and his squad had proven their point. They weren't the primitive beings the Zifrins thought they were. They were survivors, warriors honed by the struggles of a harsh universe. "It's not about the tools," Sterling said calmly, his voice cutting through the silence of the arena. "It's about the will to fight, to survive. That's what you don't understand." Kellner looked around at his fellow Zifrins, who stood helpless, no longer secure in their telepathic prowess. His authority as a leader was now in question. He had underestimated the humans, thinking their primitive weapons were symbols of a backward species, but the Zifrins had forgotten their own history. In their quest for mental superiority, they had lost the physical edge their ancestors once had. They no longer understood the sheer force of will that drove a species to endure against impossible odds. Sterling could see the realization dawn in Kellner's expression. The alien leader's face, once smug with confidence, was now slack with uncertainty. "You've grown dependent on your powers," Sterling continued, his voice firm but without malice. "You've forgotten what it means to face a challenge head-on, to fight without relying on the mind alone." The other humans, still clutching their primitive weapons, stood tall. Lieutenant Briggs, battered but unbowed, wiped the sweat from his brow and exchanged a look with his comrades. They had faced death many times before in countless battles across distant planets, but this was different. They had come expecting a demonstration, and instead, they had shown an entire race the cost of complacency. Kellner's eyes dimmed slightly as he took a hesitant step forward, his earlier bravado fully deflated. "We did not intend for this," he said, his telepathic voice softer now, almost apologetic. We believed our way was superior, that we had evolved beyond the need for conflict. It appears we were wrong." Sterling nodded, lowering his stone to his side. There was no need to press the victory any further. The Zifrins had learned their lesson, not through bloodshed, but through a humbling realization. They had mocked the humans, seeing their use of primitive tools as an indicator of inferiority. But now they understood. It wasn't the technology that mattered. It was the spirit, the indomitable will to survive that made the humans dangerous. "We're not here to conquer," Sterling said evenly, his tone softening slightly. "We came here to make contact, to learn from each other. But don't mistake our history of conflict as weakness. Our strength comes from those challenges, from overcoming adversity. That's why we survive." Kellner nodded slowly, visibly humbled. His fellow Ziphrans, once so haughty and dismissive, now looked at the humans with a mixture of awe and respect. They had misjudged these visitors from Earth, and now the scales of understanding had shifted. "What we once ridiculed," Kellner admitted, "we now respect. You are unlike any species we have encountered. Your willpower, your refusal to yield, it is something we did not anticipate." His telepathic voice trembled slightly with regret. "Perhaps we have more to learn from you than we thought." Sterling's gaze remained steady, though there was no triumph in his expression. This wasn't about victory or dominance. It was about respect. He nodded once, accepting Kellner's words as a truce, a recognition that both species could teach each other something valuable. The arena, once an exhibition of superiority, had become a symbol of humility. "Then maybe this is the start of something new," Sterling replied. "A partnership." Kellner inclined his head, humbled but grateful. "Indeed, Captain. Perhaps you are right." The humans relaxed slightly, their weapons lowered but still in hand, ready if needed. They had come expecting mockery, and instead had earned the respect of a species that had forgotten the value of a warrior's spirit. As the tension drained from the air, there was a sense that something greater had been achieved, a mutual understanding that went beyond weapons or psychic powers. And as the twin suns of Xiphoros sank low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the crystalline city, Captain Sterling knew one thing for certain. Humans were far from the primitive beings the galaxy thought they were. They were survivors, and that made them dangerous